I'd love to introduce Sandi George. She is the Director of Talent Acquisition at ConnectiveRx. Sandi, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and what is ConnectiveRx?
Sure. Again, my name's Sandi George. I'm the Director of Talent Acquisition here at ConnectiveRx. I've been in recruiting for over 20 years, spent most of my career on the agency side and moved into the corporate side, about 5 or 6 years ago. So staffing is my life. I've seen it from both sides. I understand the relationships that need to be built between our partners and our company. A little bit about ConnectiveRx. We help pharmaceutical manufacturers, healthcare providers, and patients by facilitating access to medications. So our goal is to be a single partner solution that helps patients get on and stay on therapy. We have expertise in several areas: hub services and patient support, end-to-end patient affordability programs. And then we also do point of care awareness and adherence messaging.
Awesome. How about an icebreaker? What's your favorite cheese?
Smoked Gouda.
Gouda, yum. Smoked Gouda, regular Gouda. All right. Thank you, Sandi. Really appreciate that. And
Thanks
all right,
for having
Orli. Orli Becker is the Vice President and GM of Global Head of VMS Solutions at Magnit, formerly Pro Unlimited. Orli, why don't you share some background about yourself and about Magnit?
Wonderful. I'd love to. Thank you, Joseph. Again, my name is Orli Becker. I am responsible for the direction, strategy, and growth of our VMS here at Magnit. Been at Magnit for 11 years, but been in the industry for 23. And I really spent my entire career consulting with and helping clients optimize their use of technology in our space, ensuring that they have the most efficient workflows and program design while evolving, maturing their programs by leveraging the latest technologies, functionality, and integrations. A little bit about Magnit. Simply put, we help put workers to work while minimizing the friction and providing a great worker experience backed by over 30 years of domain expertise. And we do this by providing our clients with an integrated workforce management platform, which includes industry-leading software, services, and data, which help to deliver the real-time intelligence organizations really need to be successful in sourcing, tracking, and managing high-quality contingent labor, while also effectively managing costs and risks.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And what about your icebreaker? What is your favorite cheese?
My favorite cheese is Swiss.
Swiss. Yum. I like Swiss too. All right. Ben, let's go ahead with you. You got the spiel. So
all right. So yeah, thank you. I guess I'll start. I'm going to give a slightly more long-winded bio only for the context of this webinar. But after about 10 years in management consulting in my career, I got into this space about 20 years ago, specifically running a large MSP. And over the years, I've been an external MSP VMS provider. I've done implementations of the solution. I've been a consultant at Brightfield when Brightfield was Brightfield Strategies and did consulting, advising companies on their approach and sourcing the solution. So, and then I also ran the internal program at Bloomberg. So I've got a 360 perspective of this solution. So I look forward to contributing beyond my Glider hat. And Glider is a software as a service or SaaS platform that is essentially what we call skills intelligence. We have a number of different solutions aligned with the recruiting funnel. So certain things that enable recruiters at the top of the funnel all the way down to L&D initiatives once you have resources in the door. We're going to focus specifically on our assessments, our skills assessment product, which is being used in collaboration with Magnit and ConnectiveRx.
All right, you don't escape your icebreaker. What is your favorite?
Although smoked Gouda is on top 5, and it's a hard choice for someone who loves cheese, but I'm going to have to say Roquefort.
Oh.
Very indulgent.
Need to up my cheese game.
Well, thank you everyone for indulging us with your favorite cheese. I'm super hungry right now. All right, so I hopefully I'm not sharing anymore because again, we wanted to keep this super conversational and make sure that everyone here also has a moment, has a chance to ask questions, or at least the audience to ask questions. So I'm going to start with Sandi. Tell us about your business challenge. What was happening at ConnectiveRx? What were you trying to address by working with, someone like Glider and Magnit?
Sure. So when I first started thinking about and looking into a VMS, and I'll say VMS because I was completely against MSP initially, we had several pain points that I wanted to address. We staff a pretty significant volume of contractors every year. And we also are constantly growing our full-time staff. So in order to manage both of those large programs coming in at the same time, it was putting a lot of pressure and stress on my team to manage all of that. There were inconsistent assessments across suppliers and ConnectiveRx. So we asked our agency partners to, provide an assessment to any potential contractors that were coming on board. We were using a system, and there was no ability to really understand if everyone was meeting the same level of experience because everybody's assessments were different. And then we were lacking the ability to really have supplier scorecards and really manage those relationships effectively. Our managers were approving time cards for contractors in various systems because we were following the systems of staffing agencies that we were partnered with. So that was very time consuming for them on a regular basis. And then to, add to that, our finance department was also processing invoices from all of those different suppliers on a weekly basis. And then one other area was just how are we able to, communicate effectively from an employee relations standpoint, helping to make sure that our contractors are getting the things that they need. And that was difficult for our employee relations team to manage because, again, they were having those relationships with all of the different staffing agencies instead of a VMS partner. So those were our challenges. I can stop there, or I can go on and on and on with how we move forward. So do you want me to save the good stuff for later?
No. Please feel free to spill whatever you need to on this. Super interesting. What roles were you primarily hiring for? Was there specific roles or?
Yeah, the majority of the staffing that we do is our patient support type roles. So those folks that are interacting with the patients on a day-to-day basis. And that's the type of positions that we generally fill at volume. We also staff, our tech side of the business and some of the other areas of our business on both full-time and contract. But the majority of those folks are the folks that are, providing services directly to the patient.
Right. And I imagine them obviously being in the healthcare and pharmaceutical industry and being highly competitive and in high demand.
Yes, absolutely. Especially in our geographic locations, because there is a lot of other companies that do healthcare services.
Right. So why did you decide to partner with Glider and Magnit?
Sure. So we did evaluate several VMS providers, and really after looking at and evaluating what each of those different providers could bring to us and the pain points that they could solve, Magnit was a no-brainer. They checked all the boxes, were able to help us to manage all of the things that I mentioned earlier. And then, the more we spoke with them, the more I realized that the MSP piece of the business that they also offer and the expertise there was really a value add that I couldn't not take on. So, that was the main reason that we chose we chose Magnit. I worked with Orli on the front end of that relationship building process. She was fabulous to work for, answered all of my questions, and really helped me to make the right decision. I will say, though, that giving up control and taking on that MSP piece was tough for me. It's hard to let go when you've had to manage and control that for so long. It was the best decision that I made. The relationship that we've built with the Magnit team has been irreplaceable. They really have been a partner. And what I tell, and I'll talk about a little bit more later, is I tell my team and anyone internally and externally that they really are an extension of the talent acquisition department here at ConnectiveRx. They really understand us and they partner with us every step of the way. So it was easy. It was a no-brainer. I'm thrilled that we did it. And then to piggyback on that and how we ended up with Glider, as we were building out our VMS with Magnit, we talked about the pain point that we had, I mentioned earlier, where all of our staffing partners were using their own assessment tools. We were using a separate assessment tool. And we really wanted something that was more streamlined, that would help our team, but also help our agency partners to be able to understand what we were looking for and be consistent. So they're all on a level playing field.
Yeah.
In talking through that, they brought up Glider, and we had looked at Glider, but we hadn't pulled the trigger yet. So when they mentioned Glider, I immediately said yes, because Glider had all of the things that we were looking for across all of our positions. The company that we were using before was focused specifically on the patient-facing level of role or type of role that we were looking to fill most. So that's the type of tool that we used then. But having something that we can really utilize across all of our positions, both technical and non-technical, Glider, again, checked all those boxes, and it was easy for me to say yes.
Well, that's great to hear. And maybe this question is for both you and for Orli. What was the previous pre-Magnit, hesitation with MSP, or at least using an MSP? And is that consistent with people in your role?
For me, just taking the MSP piece was, just giving up that control, letting them manage the program for us, because I had been responsible for that, the entire time I was here, and I came from the agency side. So, when I was on the agency side, the MSP term was like, ooh, we're really not going to be able to build those relationships. And once I understood how Magnit worked and how that MSP service partnership with them would work, we talk about things all the time, and it's, they really do partner with me, so that we can ensure that those relationships that we built with our agency partners prior to the VMS stay true. And that was one of the areas that I feared wouldn't happen.
And I would add also that I think that ConnectiveRx, having you, Sandi, there is a unique situation and a huge benefit, because you do come with all of that experience. What we typically see with first generation programs that have never really had a formalized program in place with an MSP or VMS is that they don't have that experience, and they don't know how to run programs such as this. And so they gravitate more towards that MSP model, because they're leaning on individuals that have that in-house. But I think even on more mature programs that have that expertise because they've been in this space for a long time, I think even they see the value in having an MSP, because it really frees them up to be more strategic, so that you have a partner to lean on for more of that tactical, operational, day-to-day activities, but also to bring that intel to you on what we're seeing with other clients and what we're seeing in the market and keeping up with legislation. And in that sense becomes a really great partnership.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Ben, I don't know if you want to add anything, given your background working at MSPs as well, or
Yeah, I've got so many things I want to say. I'd take up the rest of the webinar, but just a couple of things. Looking at it from the first generation MSP perspective, and then I'll talk a little bit about the approach that was taken with the glider assessments. Orli, as you mentioned, when people don't yet have a solution at all, oftentimes the components of their contingent workforce management are so fragmented. The companies don't even have a full picture of what that entails. So Sandi, you mentioned like invoicing. Contingent workforce invoicing is some of the most complex invoicing there is, because the term that I've been using for, sadly, I'll say decades now, people are not pencils. It's not you buy it and you pay for it. People are at work, they have time cards, they have time card adjustments, they leave their assignments early, their assignments get extended, and all of this makes for very complex billing. I won't go into all the points, but oftentimes someone who's saying, hey, I think we want an MSP, and they think of what running an MSP is, they think about the things they can see in front of them, but don't realize that an MSP, oftentimes even just on-sites as a term pre-COVID, when on-sites were always truly on-site, you say like, well, there's 5 people here, like surely we could just, we could hire those 5 people and do it ourselves. There's this whole behind the scenes function, shared services that's more and more complex than that. So I definitely recognize all those things that Sandi mentioned. I guess in terms of the approach to assessments and what companies typically do when they're bringing assessments into this, we have integration, Glider and Magnit integration that makes for a lot of efficiencies. Not all of the companies that use Glider in our CW program solution have that. So it's a big advantage in that integration that we have with Magnit. And then ConnectiveRx is like many companies that first start using assessments, in that it's either they didn't have an assessment at all, or we have hundreds of staffing companies that are our Glider customers, and we hear that they'll be at this company XYZ, they have assessment requirements, but they don't tell them, which platform to use or which test to use. So from my perspective, you could have someone saying, well, let me just, use an easier test or a shorter test, and I'll have more candidates willing to take it. My candidates are going to perform better. So then managers are left with this apples, oranges, watermelon sort of comparison of how their candidates did. So that's a big driver that we see to our CW program solution, which is all the same tests used by all of the suppliers, all of the candidates that are evaluated across suppliers have taken the same test. And then focusing on a particular job family is fairly typical to say, let's be careful about how we're introducing this. There's a lot of change management. We won't want to impact our performance metrics, and we'll start with a job family. Could be IT, it most often is, could be an operations role or a call center, contact center type role. And that's very common for our program solutions, and then expand from there once they realize, okay, the proof of concept worked really well. We've had the success that we expected, and we'll expand into other job families.
Awesome, thank you. Orli, I think this is a good segue for a question, about why this happened, or, at large, obviously at Magnit, you're working with lots of companies like ConnectiveRx and, mainly contingent programs, I understand. So what is unique, I guess, why are companies driving towards this model that is unique to, say, like Magnit and the Glider integration?
Yeah, when I think about drivers, I think we in this webinar have spoken a lot to what we typically see with first generation buyers and what drives them. And it's your typical things like workflow efficiencies, visibility, compliance, speed to hire, access to better talent, cost savings. On this market, cost savings is important to everyone in the economy that we're in. But I'll add a slightly different flair here. Very interesting. SIA, which is the Staffing Industry Analysts, conducts these buyer surveys where they measure the satisfaction of their buyer community with the NPS scores. And we have seen a steady decline in NPS scores, indicating dissatisfaction with tech in the HR space as a whole. And I attribute this to a few different reasons that I think then become drivers. First is higher expectations. I like to say the innovation of today is the expectation of tomorrow, right? Can you imagine us still using dial-up? So what's happening is that clients are just becoming more educated in our space, and they're demanding more because they understand better and they have higher expectations. They understand the need for innovation and for that enhanced user experience. I also think that clients that are a little bit more mature and experienced in this particular space need and desire to go through program evolution and optimization. We find oftentimes their programs just become stale over time. There is a ton of new innovation and functionality coming out with the VMSs, but oftentimes clients are not adopting it, they're not using it, or perhaps they're not leveraging additional channels to talent. And I think that is ultimately contributing to some of the low satisfaction rates as well. Another big one is security and global compliance. We know in the tech world, the amount of hacks and data breaches and global privacy and compliance requirements that are being released through legislation are enormous. I mean, I feel like every other day there's something new that's happening that's being released. And so companies now are really scrutinizing their compliancy and to ensure that they're leveraging software that is really secure to keep them safe. And then lastly, I think a big driver that we're seeing is DE&I initiatives. So DE&I has always been top of mind in our space, but more so from a supplier base. Like companies always wanted to make sure that they had a diverse pool of suppliers. But now we've taken it to a whole nother level. And what clients want are insights and reporting of their workers and their candidates to make sure that their DE&I goals are being attained as it relates to the workforce itself.
Interesting. So DE&I, how does that work itself into the the Magnit and Glider equation?
Yeah, so we're partnering with our clients to ensure that we're moving the needle on this for them, that they are able to attain their DE&I goals and initiatives. Most clients in today's climate have specific goals when it comes to this topic. And it's important that their vendors partner with them to help them attain those goals. And so what we have done in our VMS is we have built a process in which both workers and candidates, which is new and different in our space where it's inclusive of candidates, can anonymously self-identify their diversity classifications, and we then can create very powerful insights and anonymized reporting for our clients to help them attain those goals that I just mentioned.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Joseph, can I just jump in and add that that is a huge differentiator, and I will say that as more and more companies start using a larger proportion of contingent workforce, some are at 50% and north. If you have a diversity initiative and you're lacking transparency into 50% or more of your workforce, your employee diversity initiatives will only go so far. And some companies, the term co-employment gets everybody nervous, and lots of companies just sort of say, if it even smells of co-employment, I don't want to get near it. It is not a co-employment issue to collect this information. Not everybody does it, and I could see how that would be hugely impactful to a holistic view of diversity programs.
Yeah, how does that impact you, I guess, Sandi, at the enterprise?
Yeah, I mean, all of the things that Orli said are things that we're looking for. We really want to make sure we convert a lot of our contractors into full-time employees. So we want to ensure that we're being compliant and we're getting a diverse pool of candidates and workers, that lends itself down the road to our full-time employee population. We want that diversity on both sides, contractors and full-time, but again, having the opportunity to then have those folks convert into a full-time employee only levels that up.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thanks, Orly, also for sharing, kind of like the breadth of drivers. Sandi, I know we didn't prep for this one, but I was just curious if you want to share. Are there any other drivers contributing, that would, be important for ConnectiveRx beyond like DE&I and, the streamlining of the hiring process and those efficiencies?
I mean, I think Orly commented on this, but the reporting capabilities we lacked when it came to our contingent staff. We don't track them in our system like we do our employees. So having the Magnit system be able to do that for us, and we can combine those things together and really look at reporting across any reporting capability that we would be interested in. Their system gives us the capability to be able to do that.
Awesome. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Ben, from the Glider perspective, beyond what Orly and Sandi have shared, are there any other drivers that you've seen for this new model?
I think they've covered them. So rather than just sort of, grasping for anything additional, I think that was a really comprehensive list. And those are the ones that I see most often or what drives a change like this.
Awesome.
The change is hard too. I mean, we can get into
Okay, so let's talk about change management. This being a new model, Sandi, I'd imagine there being a lot of change management and hurdles, with different teams, as well as obviously within talent acquisition. How did you mitigate that, or what process did you go through?
Yeah, change, absolutely, to Ben's point, is hard. I think we can all agree on that. I think, and I'm going to probably regurgitate some of the things that I already said, but I think what was able to ease the minds of our internal staff, our stakeholders, and our, the hiring managers, first and foremost, was ensuring that they understood that the Magnit team, the MSP piece of the Magnit relationship, was really an extension of my team. They're our partner. Consider them one of my teammates. And I think that helped to make our internal staff more comfortable in managing that relationship, and understanding that, Magnit's coming to us as a vendor neutral partner, right? So they're my team. They're not, picking sides or picking favorites. When it comes to our suppliers, they're really there to manage that process and help us along the way. So I think that was probably the biggest thing, but don't get me wrong, there was definitely some challenges that we had to overcome, and it was a lot of training and support, and getting them on a Teams call and kind of walking them through the process or walking them through the system to help them learn how to do it and manage through that. I think some of the things that were pain points before really made it easy for people to recognize and want the change with us. Again, hiring managers having to approve time cards and sometimes 4 or 5 different systems plus our own was a huge challenge for them. Not challenge, but time consuming. For my team, I think, again, similar to how I felt, it's the letting go. But I think once they realized that they could let it go, it really gave them the ability to focus on filling our full-time positions. It took the pressure off of them to be able to focus in the areas that they're supposed to focus in, and still feel confident that other side of the business, that contract staffing, was still being managed effectively, and positions were getting filled timely.
Yeah.
And then I'll just add, as far as the assessments are concerned, like I mentioned before, we were using them for our operations level positions, not quite as much for not at all for technical. So having the Glider team and the Glider assessments built, it was easier for the hiring managers and operations to make the switch, because it was a better tool. And then they were able to see the same tool being used on the Magnit side. So we were able to, make it a little more seamless for them to understand results. from the technical side, giving them now the ability to do assessments instead of trying to create them on their own, and do them through an actual interview. You know, this has been a huge savings in time for them, to be able to just, you know, send out an assessment and have it completed.
Yeah. Do you mind, and maybe this is more of a broad question for everyone, sharing or providing recommendations or kind of like walking through how you went through, you know, implementing this whole process? You know, like what was the process? What recommendations would you provide other people in your position looking to do something like this?
Take
Joseph,
the advice of the experts.
oh, sorry, I talked over that, Sandy. That's worth repeating.
I said, take the advice of the experts. There were definitely times where, you know, I fought tooth and nail, and only to realize that they were right. And they were looking out for our best interest as a company. Again, change is hard. I am the first to admit it. Change is very hard. It was easy though. You know, like I said, I worked with Orli on the front end of our relationship with Magnit, knowing that her team was behind us with the implementation made the process much easier. I'll let Orli and Ben talk about the specific, you know, integration with their two systems, but I just want to, you know, add quickly that Ben's team was able to help us and help our teams build the specific assessments that we wanted. We didn't have to pick something out of the box, that were then built into the Magnit process. In addition, they were able to share those exact assessments with us on our full-time account with Glider. So we didn't have to recreate the wheel. We created an assessment and we can send that to to Magnit, or you know, Magnit can send that to us. So that relationship for me has been a huge relief that we didn't have to do this twice.
I'll add some color to this as well from an implementation standpoint. And Sandy, I'm thrilled to hear all these comments, and they actually very much align to our Magnit program team, whom I spent some time prepping with prior to this call. They were saying what a great relationship they have with you and with the team. But you know, at Magnit, we really pride ourselves in providing a true consultative experience for our clients. We leverage our own experiences to make recommendations, share best practices, guide the clients, and really be a true partner in helping to shape and design what this full contingent workforce program should look like. We have a very structured, proven methodology in place that we follow through implementation that consists of discovery, design, testing, streamlined rollout. Change management is a big part. We talked a little bit about change management before. That's a really big part of implementation. And it's really being able to identify who are the stakeholders beyond just suppliers, workers, and ConnectiveRx. Like, go deeper in ConnectiveRx. Who needs to know what? This is new to the organization. The executives probably need to know about the program. The line managers need to know how to create requisitions and how to review candidates, et cetera. So it's really being able to identify those stakeholders and then have a strategy in place on how we communicate and train each one of those stakeholder pockets specifically.
Ben, I think you were going to add something before, or
I'll just add to that last comment that Orli made, and that it's communication is everything, and of course it is, and people say that, but the tailored communication that Orli mentioned, segmenting the stakeholders and what's the impact to them, and tailoring communication and training for them, and then repeating that communication. I will say this has nothing to do with Contingent. When I was at Bloomberg, I was helping implement an ATS, and it was the second ever SaaS-based implementation there. I communicated 4, 5, 6 times with the various stakeholders throughout the process. And then still post-launch, there was lots of change management to do as well. So just factoring that into your plan, fighting the temptation to say, we just got to get this thing launched. If you launch it without the readiness and without the willingness and the adoption, then it's going to fail.
Yeah. So what are some of the pushbacks, through change management? Oftentimes, there are the common challenge, pushbacks. Are there anything that you could share around that? And then how would you overcome that pushback?
I'll jump in just to say, specific to a first generation MSP VMS, you're countering well, I've always done it this way and it works great for me. You're trying to implement consistency, transparency, compliance, and the end user. I was not involved with ConnectiveRx's implementation of the Magnit solution. This is not a commentary there. It's a broader statement around what I've seen implementing this elsewhere. They don't necessarily like those things, and they've always done it that way. And so that's part of that change management. You have to acknowledge what they're giving up and show them the trade-offs and the benefits. And sometimes just say, we have to do this because, and you can't do it this way anymore because. But it's usually that's sort of the bottom of the change management pyramid, is like getting into, well, why were people doing it the way they were doing it? And what were their motivations for doing it that way? If you sugarcoat it, don't acknowledge it and address it head on, that you're also set up for failure.
I would agree with that last comment you made about the motivation. That's key, right? Because every client is going to have slightly different drivers and slightly different priorities of those drivers. So if you can tailor the communication, the training, the entire implementation, really, what's it called? With them, what's in it for me?
Exactly.
It makes a big impact to adoption because they really could start seeing it from their lens.
And then, Sandi, what about you? Like with the people on your team, your recruiters on your team, or were there any pushback from, say, like hiring teams, the hiring manager, I should say?
My team was on board from the moment I said the words. I don't think there was pushback from any of our, hiring managers. I think, it's just managing through that change. It's a new system, it's a new process, and, just help me get there.
All right. Thanks for sharing that. So you touched on this, and I think this is unique and interesting to the partnership here with the three of us, right? And then specifically between Glider and ConnectiveRx is, implementing this contingent workforce program, then having it bridge the gap to the full-time hiring world. You managed both at ConnectiveRx, and like, how did that happen? Like, what was the process, or, kind of walk us through that. And then Ben, I'm sure you had a lot of commentary to add as well.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we had a system that we were using prior, and it was primarily for our operations level positions. And we tried our best to mirror that when we were working with our staffing partners prior to the VMS. So we would give them, the list of questions that we had in our assessment and try to get them to mirror those things the best they could in the assessment tools that they were working with. And my tech recruiter here, had asked on several occasions if we can get something that can focus a little more on the tech tools and the tech assessments. So we had done some homework. Actually, he had been the one who had brought Glider to me. We demoed it. We talked about it. We just weren't quite there yet when it was introduced as an option from the Magnit team. So we knew that we were going to do it on the Magnit side, and in that relationship for our contingent staff. And they partnered with Glider partnered with our managers and our tech recruiter to build those assessments out for the Magnit program. And in talking with the Glider team, we're doing all this work. Let's get this ball rolling. It was, it was a tool that we were interested in before. So if we're going to build it for our contingent hiring, let's mirror it and use it on our full-time program as well. That made it a little bit easier for, I think our hiring teams to buy in the time that was necessary to build out the tool. And then once those things were done, we created our corporate account And it's really just to reach out to the Glider team to say, hey, can you give me these assessments in my account? And they just swap them over, and we can do the same, to the Magnet program. So it was a very easy process, and we couldn't be happier that we were able to build that relationship.
And I'll also add that we were able to piggyback off of partnership work that Magnit and Glider had already done. We had the partnership in place. We had already built out the integration between the Magnit VMS and the Glider application, which really was giving users that seamless and easy user experience. The VMS will actually show the assessment scores and has embedded single sign-on links for managers to very easily access the details in the Glider system. So from an effort and time perspective, just purely on a technical implementation, because it was already in place, it was easily leveraged.
And I'll just say that in the approach in doing this, there's sort of some very specific drivers and benefits to it. And then there's sort of a broader one. The specific one I'm talking about is Sandi mentioned their use of conversion. So temp to perm, whether it's a temp to perm strategy, a try before you buy strategy, where that's your deliberate plan, or you just happen to do it where you have open employee roles, you have good contingent working, sending an assignment, move them over. That consistency of the competency assessment across the two, just make sure you don't have any gaps as you convert people. And if they went through a different process that was less rigorous, you may find that you have skills gaps and that transition isn't as smooth as you thought. The bigger picture one is a step in the right direction towards total talent management. And Joseph, we had our roundtable discussion about this. And I will say that it's something that was talked about for a long time. And the feedback from the people that attended that is primarily, no one's talking about it anymore. And what I mean by that is a holistic approach to employee and non-employee recruiting. And from my experience, there's a number of reasons for it. There's organizational stovepipes, there's technology stovepipes, there's just politics and resistance and lots of reasons for it. And above all else, it just is this daunting thing. Like, how am I going to just have this holistic view of my workforce across processes and policies? It need not be that. Let's do it all at once. This is a step in the right direction. So if you're trying to advocate for that and do more holistically and do more consistently where it makes sense, this is a great way to do that and demonstrate the success of it. So then you can say, okay, what else is on our list? Should we standardize, what policy or what process can we standardize? What systems might we want to integrate? It's a great step in the right direction as another proof of concept towards that total talent management.
And I'll add a commentary here. I agree so much with you, Ben. This whole concept of total talent management was such a hot topic, and it kind of died a slow death. But I think it's going to come back, and I think it's going to come back maybe under a different name, because we definitely are starting to see recent trends from companies where they want their entire workforce managed, and they don't really necessarily need to make a distinction between the different labor categories, because it shouldn't matter how the worker is engaged, whether it's FTE, staff aug, SOW, IC, freelancer, gig, you name it, as long as they have the right skills at the right price in the right location and are engaged compliantly. Clients now are looking for comparative insights into performance and cost of these different types of ways to engage data. And therefore, it's going to be critical for them to have this visibility across their entire workforce, identifying talent pools that can fulfill their hiring needs, no matter what that is. And we're also starting to see some legislation, such as pay parity, as an example, that I think is moving the industry more in this direction.
I just want to add one other thing too. I think as we're looking at that total talent management, a lot of companies focus on employee engagement. I think it's important that we look at engagement as a whole, right? We want to understand, and we want our the folks that have taken a contract position with us to be just as engaged as our full-time staff. We want them to feel comfortable here. We want them to feel that we value the work that they're doing. I mean, really, they're taking a chance on us by coming in for, sometimes a couple of months in the hopes that they're going to love it here, and we're going to love them, and we're going to convert them to a full-time employee. So I think engagement is something else that really we need to start focusing on considering in our contingent labor workforce.
Right. Are there any other trends or insights? Because they're almost like you're creating these new best practices and really deploying total talent management in practice, right? Unique to ConnectiveRx. Sandi, Orli, Ben, any other trends or new best practices that you've observed from this new process that you've created?
One of the things that we've been able to do, and I think it speaks to the relationship that we've been able to build with the folks here on this call, is that I've been able to implement a new role in my organization of candidate experience, really focusing on not just the onboarding, getting the folks in the door, but really, again, to the engagement that I mentioned before, is to really ensure that the candidate and the employee has a good, positive experience throughout their life here. We want them to advance and grow, and contractors hopefully to convert to full-time employees. So, building the relationship with the Magnit and the Glider team has enabled me to turn one of my recruiter positions into a candidate experience manager and be able to help really streamline the onboarding and the candidate experience for that first 30, 60, 90 days and then beyond.
I'll add to that too. When I think about experience, I think about it from two different angles. One, the worker experience, Sandi, just like you mentioned, giving those users a really good, easy, streamlined experience. But I feel like we've now, again, expectations are higher than before. We've taken that to a new level with something I call worker sentiment, which is actually measuring how worker felt about their experience. Were they delighted? Did they feel included and welcomed? And now that is becoming just as important as having that streamlined experience for onboarding. And then the other angle I look at experience is from an end user experience. So like the ConnectiveRx managers that are leveraging the tool as an example. Clients, I feel like when they're buying technology, it is critically important in today's day and age that it is easy and that it's intuitive and that it feels consumerized, a lot less like enterprise software and more like what we use in our social lives, like an Amazon or a Facebook, where you don't necessarily need a user guide to know how to navigate. And that really is top of mind for a lot of buyers. And actually on the heels of that, from a trends perspective, when it comes to technology, is innovation. I mean, it's blowing up. It's all over. It's on all of our LinkedIn feeds. The client's demand for leveraging vendors that have the latest and greatest tech with embedded AI in their workflows to introduce things like automation, prediction, insights, recommendations is also becoming a huge trend right now.
I'll just add, Joseph, that skills-based hiring, I mean, this is in effect what Glider enables. When you're competing for talent with not just your competitors or people in similar roles, but or trying to attract as broad a talent pool as possible, you don't want to exclude someone based on maybe prior work experience or education if they're very qualified to do the job. So this opens up that door for somebody to say, I'd love to take your test and I know I'm going to do extremely well in it. And demonstrate that competency, even if they've never been in a role like this one before. So skills-based hiring is something that's been talked about a lot over the last year. And this, I think, is within that construct.
Excellent. So I want to make sure the audience has time to ask questions. So if you do have anything, please type it in the question box, in the Zoom question box, and I'll try to get it answered. But I do have one here, and it was the hook of today's webinar. It was the $300,000. So what were some of those key factors? If you could, share with us a little broadly about, how did you get there?
Yeah, so it's a lot of the things that I mentioned early on ended up, resulting in dollars, right? If you think about how much time it takes our finance team to have to go through and process individual invoices for each staffing agency on a weekly basis, to now only having to process one, because everything is billed through the Magnit system, that saved them lots and lots and lots of time. I think we anticipated, I'd have to pull it up, how many hours that would save them. Managers and our employee relations team. So from a manager perspective, again, approving those time cards, we anticipated that probably cut their time in half, going into one system and clicking some buttons and approving time cards versus trying to remember what agency applications they needed to log into to look at, and approve time cards in their systems. My team, as I mentioned, I was able to, essentially cut a role and repurpose that into, an area that we needed to focus more in, which is that engagement and experience area of bringing our new people in. With respect to the assessments and, and the interviewing and all of those things, it's primarily time. So man hours, if you will, or person hours, if you will, that we were able to save that resulted in dollars. So I hope that answers the question. If anybody,
no, it does. And to unpack one more thing, if you don't mind, and this is probably for everyone. When you think about this new model and you think about, okay, we're adding in VMS technology, we're adding assessments and interviews through a technology. Did you, people often think like, oh, this is going to slow down things, it's going to slow down the funnel, but like, talk to us a little bit about that. Like, did you see improvements in, time to hire, or what areas, of improvement did you see in that funnel?
Yeah, we did. I think the main area that I think has helped us is the integration between Magnit and Glider. So, we did have to add a new system, right? So our hiring managers go into our system for full-time staff and the Magnit system for our contingent labor process, right? So job descriptions, job postings, resume reviews, and those sorts of things. But not having to go into a third system to access the Glider, it's all built into the Magnit system. So that I think has helped, kind of make that process a lot better and, continue to take away those pain points that we were experiencing before.
Okay. And this is really, yeah, please go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to add one comment to that because I think it was a great point. And on the heels of it, I think one of the fears when introducing a new system is now you're going to have duplicative processes, duplicative tasks. You have to do things in two different places. And so speaking of trends, that's another big one that we're seeing is this expectation to have a very seamless end-to-end workflow, which includes tightly integrating the VMS with the client's ecosystem, right, with their own systems. And we did this for ConnectiveRx. We integrated with their HRIS system, which allowed us to manage their foundational data and their worker data as to having those increased efficiencies, the accuracies, and then resulting in the cost savings that Sandi mentioned.
Yeah, I don't know how I didn't mention that, but you're right, Orli. Having that integration with the Magnit system and our system I don't think we could have done it if we weren't able to complete that. It would have been a huge undertaking for us. And it's nice to have that information feed back and forth. So it's not any more work for my team or for the management team when a hire is made. Our Magnit team, processes that again, just like my team does, and the worker feeds into our HRIS upon hire. So it makes it, very seamless.
Awesome. Well, I can't believe the time flew by so quickly. A lot of informative and great insights. And for everyone here, I will be sharing a recording of today's webinar. And if you do have any other questions, you will have my contact info and I can connect you with the panelists here. So as we close off today, Orli, Sandi, Ben, thank you. Is there anything that you'd like to leave the audience with, like a piece of advice for anyone out there who's in a similar role that you are in?
just do it.
That's so funny.
You'll be
See,
glad you did.
that's literally what I was going to say. And I was trying to think of that expression of the first step. You can just take that first step. You don't think that you have to do it all at once and do it perfectly. Take that first step.
Yes, absolutely. It's well worth it in the end.
Yeah,
Orli.
I echo what Sandy and Ben said. I think that, you know, I spend my time on a daily basis talking to prospects and talking to clients, and it can seem very overwhelming. So I love the notion of just take that first step and evolve. Rome wasn't built in a day. So this is an evolution. It's a maturity plan that could take years to achieve.
Awesome. And I can't announce the specifics of this, but there will be a formal case study that goes into a little more detail around what happened here and what we discussed today. But there will be more to come in, you know, future communication. But thank you, everyone. Thank you, panel.
Thanks, everybody.
Learned a lot.
Thank you. Thanks, Joseph.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.